Welcome everyone to Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. Thank you for joining us today. We will be having a little discussion on what I would have to say is my favorite animal, the leopard. And today I'm joined by Nikki le Roex, project coordinator for Sabre Sands leopard research with Panthera. It's great to have her on the show today to discuss the amazing work that she and Panthera have been doing with leopards and leopard conservation here in Africa. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, nice to be with you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us once again. So, as always, we start the show with giving you a chance to tell us a little about who you are and what you do. So, yeah, what are you up to over there with Panthera?
So, as you said, I'm Nikki. I am a wildlife biologist with a background in conservation genetics, and that was always kind of my first love in wildlife and conservation. And I work for Panthera coordinating their Selfie Science leopard project.
Awesome. So what does that entail? What are you doing in the leopard project?
So
Lots of
Panthera
things, I imagine.
So Panthera is a global organization that's dedicated to the conservation of wild cat species and their ecosystems. And importantly, Panthera bases its conservation initiatives very much around current, robust scientific data. So that's a necessity for our conservation initiatives. Now, within Panthera, we have a number of different programs for many different cat species. I work within the leopard program. Within the leopard program, there are then a number of different projects, but ultimately the goal of the leopard program is to promote and protect viable populations of leopards across their range. And the projects within the leopard program are fit into two groups really. So some of those projects are species specific, so they focus on leopards, and some of those projects are what we call site security initiatives. So they are more involved with protecting and maintaining the habitats in which leopards can thrive. So my project, the Sabre Sands leopard research, falls into one of those leopard specific focuses.
Okay, awesome. As I say, one of my favorite animals, so I'm quite jealous that you get to spend so much time with these spotted creatures. I was fortunate enough to get back out to the bush fairly recently, and we had some great sightings up around Botswana and the Sabre Sands, which is always such a special place for seeing leopard, as I know one of the best places, I would say. Nikki, the project with leopards and Panthera as a whole, is it just Africa or is it leopards everywhere? As in India, all over the world?
So we do focus on leopards across their range. A lot of our more leopard-focused projects are in Southern Africa, or in Africa rather. But we run projects or start new ones as and when need arises in particular locations. Typically in Africa, they're more leopard-focused, whereas in Asia, they are more site-focused, but that's not necessarily the case.
Okay, cool. And what's the current conservation status around leopards?
So leopards at a global level or at a species level are listed as vulnerable but declining. So although leopards are really adaptable and they have a wide distribution range, they are declining rapidly in many countries and in many populations. And it's estimated that they've disappeared from about 2/3 of their range in Africa already. So despite being these adaptable, widely distributed cats, they still can be very impacted by some of the threats that have come about in recent years.
Yeah, I've heard that, and a few leopard researchers that I've spoken to, and even guides on the ground have said it's also difficult for you guys to get accurate counts on leopards. Why is it difficult to get accurate counts on leopards in South Africa?
Because leopards are elusive and sneaky, and they often don't want to be seen, and that makes it really challenging to get accurate numbers. They're also nocturnal, of course, which makes it more challenging because monitoring at night is always more difficult than in the day, and their range over such a wide area. So it does depend from location to location, but in some areas their home ranges or territories are really vast, and so getting an accurate count over that kind of range is very difficult.
Yeah, I imagine so. Down here in the Cape, I know the Cape Leopard Trust guys also have a hard time finding some of those leopards, and difficult to reach areas, and you have to walk for days to get into certain locations. So yeah, I can imagine it's tricky. And as you say, I spent years as a guide trying to find leopards for guests, and it's not always easy. So I totally get that. What do you think is the biggest threat to leopards at the moment?
So there's 5 main threats to leopards across their range, and that, although which is the primary threat, differs in different areas. The 5 main threats are habitat loss and fragmentation, so there's just less area available that's suitable for leopards. The illegal killing of leopards, either for their skins, that's targeted specifically, or just incidentally. The depletion of their prey is also one that people often don't think about, and that usually happens through bushmeat poaching. So when there's not enough prey in an area, it's very difficult for leopards to persist. Poorly managed trophy hunting can also have a great impact on leopard populations, as well as retaliatory killings. If leopards are in areas where they have the opportunity to take livestock, that sometimes does happen, and often there's conflict with people. In South Africa, I would say that the primary threat to leopards would be the illegal killing of leopards for their skins. Leopard skins are often a prized item in ceremonial wear among various cultural and religious groups, and the poaching of leopards for skins to supply that trade is definitely our largest threat here in South Africa.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely something I've heard in the past. Also, I remember when I first started guiding, our reserve that we worked on was adjacent to a hunting farm, as well, where they would often, leopards, of course, would go over the fences or under the fences, moving in sometimes large areas in their territories, and they would, come into contact with these hunters from time to time, and it made it very difficult for us to view them, actually. Whenever they heard a vehicle or would hear people walking, they'd often run away, which of course makes things really difficult again to track them down. But yeah, thank you. I mean, that's really interesting, and a lot of issues to worry about for the poor leopard. But getting back to Sabre Sands, your one project is based there, and we have a camera, of course, in that area at Nkoro. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Absolutely. And it's nice to talk about the Selfie Science project because it's a happy leopard story compared to many of the other sites. So our Selfie Science research project is a long-term leopard research study that is dedicated to understanding leopard behavior and ecology, and uses that knowledge that we generate from this project to inform local wildlife management in other sites where they need conservation attention, as well as to inform broader conservation policy. And the Selfie Sands it's a unique space. So it's got 2 things really that make it this quite a unique situation. So firstly, it has a really high leopard density, and those leopards are really well protected. So they are living their happy leopard lives in the really natural circumstances, which is becoming increasingly rare to find. Also, they are incredibly relaxed with vehicles and people, which is very rare. So this is what makes the Sabre Sands such an incredible place for ecotourism and leopard viewing. It also makes it really good for leopard research, because we see in the Sabre Sands, we can frequently see leopards and observe behaviors among leopards which you don't see anywhere else. Things like mating and cubs at a very young age, kills, territorial fights, all these interesting behaviors that dictate how leopards operate in a system are very seldom seen anywhere else. But because the leopards in the Sabre Sands are so relaxed and can be viewed so frequently, we can use these observations to build up long-term life histories on individuals. And so these 2 things together make this a really unique site where, although they don't need conservation in this area, we can use what we can learn in the Sabre Sands to inform the conservation in other places.
Awesome. Yeah, as you say, the Sabre Sands is such a special place. When I started guiding, we were always very jealous of the guides around Sabre Sands and how they would, fall over leopards as they drove out on game drive. And it's still such a great place, and I'm fortunate that I still get to go there pretty often. And of course, we get to watch on the cameras very nearby. That's some of the glamorous side of leopard sightings and leopard research. But There's the not so glamorous side of scat samples, which I know, some people will wonder, well, what's that all about? What interesting data have you guys collected from scat samples of leopard?
So what we do why we collect the scats is to obtain DNA. So usually to get DNA for an individual, for a leopard, you would need blood or tissue or something else. But because we have this unique situation that I've just described in the Sabre Sands, we can actually collect scat and get DNA for each individual in that way. And that's great because it's non-invasive, it doesn't disturb the animal, but it's a really powerful kind of extra level of information that we can get to feed into our research. So what we do, first of all, is building up the individual genetic profiles of the leopards in the Selfie Science. And that takes time. But once you have enough of the population, of genetic profiles for enough of the population, you can use these profiles to determine parentage or paternity, mostly. So who's the dad of the cubs, which is always very interesting to know, as well as relatedness between any two individuals. And parentage and relatedness actually govern a huge number of processes and behavior among leopards. And so it's a really important extra level of knowledge that we have in the Sabre Sands that, again, we just don't have elsewhere. Then we also can use DNA to assist with combating wildlife crime, so specifically the poaching of leopard skins. So genetic profiles, genetic signatures across a landscape mean that you can often pinpoint, if you've got broad coverage, you can pinpoint where poached leopard skin comes from, the area that it comes from, and that can aid in security initiatives and anti-poaching and identifying places that are perhaps not known to be risky for leopards.
Amazing. I actually didn't know that. I didn't know that you could use that as profiling system. So that's really great. For you, besides digging through leopard scat, what is one of your highlights working on the project?
That's a tricky one. I'm so fortunate to be able to not only work on leopards, but even within our leopard program to work on leopards in kind of their utopia, their best case scenario. So I get incredible opportunities from the viewing that I get to do of leopards in the Sabre Sands, the type of research I get to do. But I think one thing that really stands out for me that is the kind of commitment and the dedication and the enthusiasm of the staff, of the lodges and the ecotourism operators within the Sabre Sands. We collaborate very closely with the staff in the Sabre Sands, and without them, that our research there just wouldn't be possible. And there is no end to their enthusiasm and commitment and support to this work. And that's very inspiring, and it makes it an incredible place to work.
I imagine, yeah. I know a few of the guides and staff in the area, as you say, just wonderful, wonderful group of people. Why does the Sabre Sands have such a high density of leopards? And is that actually true, or is it just because they're so habituated that we see them more often?
It is true, but we also do see them often, of course. But they do have an incredibly high density. It's an ideal habitat for leopards. They also have an incredibly high prey density there, which means that the area can just sustain so many more leopards. So many more leopards can live there together because there's much less competition for resources. And as I said earlier, the Sabre Sands is really well protected. So it's protected from the illegal killing that we've spoken about as one of the major threats. So all those things together just make it a really ideal place for leopards. And then because of their relaxed nature, you just see them that much more as well.
Yeah, as you say, every time I go there, I'm amazed by it. I feel often that because there's so many in the area and because there's such abundance of food, the territories are also smaller. Is that why you also get more in the areas? Like each female's territories are much smaller than, let's say, areas like the Cape, for example, or Namibia. Is that right?
Absolutely. So when you are a leopard and you need a territory, you need a home range, you need a space that can support you all throughout the year. And when you've got this high prey density, there's water around, resources are rich, you can live in a smaller area than when resources are poor. So if you can live in a smaller area, then there's just that many more leopards that can be in that system.
Yeah, awesome. So for myself, this little picture here behind me, certainly one of my favorite leopard sightings ever. This one was actually in the Okavango, a lovely young female. What's been your favorite leopard sighting? I know that's not an easy question, but what do you think has been your favorite or most memorable leopard sighting?
That is an impossible question, actually. I've been turning it over and over in my mind, and I'm not sure I could pick one, but I did have a sighting recently that springs to mind of a male leopard in the western sector of the Sabre Sands. He is kind of just coming of age, and he is enormous for his age already. And he's a beautiful leopard, green eyes, pink nose, just an absolutely stunning cat. And he was incredibly relaxed with us, with the vehicle. And while we were watching him, the hyena came by and came right up to him. And I've never seen a hyena and leopard interacting before in person like that. And he stood his ground and just hackled up, gave him a few growls, revved a few times at the hyena, and the hyena quickly went on its way. But for me, seeing those kind of interactions and behaviors is really special. So I think that of late, certainly, that's been one of my favorites. He then settled down to now completely nonplussed.
That's the great thing about the cats, that you can just move on from any issue very quickly, unlike us, for example. But that sounds really cool. I love those sort of animal interactions as well. Some of my favorite sightings have been the same sort of thing. This sighting was actually just after she was walking through the long grass and scared a couple of little button quail out of the grass, jumped up right next to the vehicle, snatched one out of the sky and just ate it in one gulp, and then kept walking like nothing had happened, which was just unbelievable, as you know. It's just such a special thing. All right, Nikki. So, question we always go to ask, what are your hopes for the future regarding leopard conservation?
Also a tricky one, but I think one of the things that people are often unaware of. So, as I said, leopards they're not yet critically endangered across their range or at a species level, but they are declining, and the threats that they're facing are very real. Because leopards are often, Sabre Sands aside, are often not seen, people often assume that they're doing okay in the background. Just because you don't see them, they're still there, and populations are still fine, they're still doing well. But that is actually not the case in many instances. And so, because we don't see them, we almost don't notice the decline if we're not really looking and paying attention. So I think for me, the awareness of what is actually going on and how problematic those threats really are is crucial, and kind of increasing that awareness now while we still have the chance to turn it around before things get to kind of an endangered or critically endangered level, when obviously the outcome is a lot more likely to be dire. So I think we've got an opportunity now, if we can just raise awareness and make sure people are really understand that these threats are having a real impact now, we've got an opportunity to turn it around.
Awesome. Yeah, as you say, we've seen such good stories with leopards as well in the Sabre Sands, where people have come to know it as an area that is, as you say, a leopard utopia and an incredible place to visit on safari. So thank you so much for all the amazing work you guys are doing over there. Keep it up. And thank you for chatting with us today, Nikki. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful being here, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about some of our work.
Yeah, it's again our great pleasure, and always fun for me to chat about leopards. We'll think of you guys every time we get some on the cameras, which we are pretty fortunate to get quite often, which is really awesome. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you all out there for joining us and for watching the show. Please join us again next week for Africam4Good, brought to you by explore.org. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay informed for any of our upcoming shows. But for now, it's cheers from all of us. See you next week.